The rain came down in sheets that blurred the world into grey watercolour streaks. Lady Catherine Fairfax stood in the garden of Thornwood Manor, her thin dress already soaked through to her skin. She did not move. She had learned long ago that there was no point in running from cruelty. It would find her anyway. "There you are, you wretched girl." Her stepmother's voice cut through the sound of falling rain. Lady Thornwood stood beneath the safety of the stone archway, her face twisted in disgust. "Look at you, dripping like a drowned rat. You are an embarrassment to this family." Catherine said nothing. Words only made things worse. She kept her eyes down and watched the rain bounce off the stone path. Her fingers had gone numb. She wondered how long she had been standing there. An hour? 2? Time moved strangely when pain became normal. "Get inside and clean yourself up. The Duke of Rothwell arrives tomorrow." Lady Thornwood's lips curled into something that might have been a smile on a kinder face. "Perhaps he will take pity on you. God knows no one else will." Catherine finally looked up. Her stepmother was already walking away, her silk skirts swishing against the dry floor inside. The sound grew fainter until Catherine was alone again with the rain. She wrapped her arms around herself and felt her whole body shake. Not from the cold, from something deeper, something that lived in her chest like a stone. She had been 14 when her father died. He had called her his little songbird. He had said she was beautiful, but then he was gone, and her stepmother showed her the truth. Catherine was not beautiful. She was plain. She was too tall. Her hair was the color of mud. Her eyes were unremarkable. Her figure was hopeless. She was 23 now, and still unmarried. Still a burden. Still unwanted. Inside the manor, Catherine climbed the servants' stairs to avoid seeing anyone. Water dripped from her dress and left a trail behind her. She knew one of the maids would have to clean it. She felt guilty about that. She felt guilty about most things. Her room was small and cold. It sat in the east wing, where no one important ever went. The walls were bare. The bed was narrow. The single window looked out over the stables. This was where unwanted daughters lived. In the spaces between things, in the forgotten corners. Catherine peeled off her wet dress and put on the only other one she owned. It was grey wool that scratched her skin. The sleeves were too short now. She had grown since last year, but there was no money for new dresses. At least that was what her stepmother said. Catherine knew the truth. There was money, just not for her. She sat on the edge of her bed and stared at her hands. They were red from the cold. Her fingers looked strange and swollen. She tried to remember what her father's hands had looked like, strong and warm. He used to hold her hand when they walked through the garden together. He had taught her the names of all the flowers, roses and lavender and foxglove and sweet pea. He had told her that growing things needed love and attention to bloom. Catherine had not bloomed. She had withered instead. A knock on the door made her jump. It was Mary, one of the kitchen maids. She was 16 and still smiled sometimes. She brought a bowl of soup and a piece of bread. "Thought you might be hungry, miss," Mary said. She set the bowl on the small table by the window. "Cook made extra." "Thank you," Catherine whispered. Her voice came out rough. She had not spoken in hours. Mary hesitated at the door. "Miss Catherine, is it true? About the Duke coming?" "I believe so. They say he never smiles. They say his heart turned to ice when his wife died." Mary's eyes went wide. "They say he lives alone in that big house with nothing but ghosts for company." Catherine nodded. She had heard the stories too. The Duke of Rothwell had been married once, 10 years ago. His young wife had died, giving birth to a stillborn son. He had locked himself away after that. He came to London for Parliament, and nothing else. He never attended balls, he never took a mistress, he never showed interest in anything or anyone. Why would he come here? Mary asked. I do not know, but Catherine did know, or at least she could guess. Her stepmother was planning something that involved Catherine and her misery. It always did. After Mary left, Catherine ate the soup slowly. It was watery but warm. The bread was stale, but she chewed it carefully and swallowed every bite. She had learned not to waste food. There were days when no one remembered to feed her. Night fell and Catherine lay in her narrow bed, listening to the rain. Tomorrow the Duke would come. Tomorrow her life would change again. She could feel it like a storm building on the horizon. She closed her eyes and tried to remember what hope felt like. But that memory was too far away now. Lost somewhere in the years between 14 and 23. Lost somewhere between her father's death and this cold, lonely room. Across the county in the great stone fortress of Rothwell House, Alexander Crane, the Duke of Rothwell, stood at the window of his study and watched the same rain fall. His reflection stared back at him from the dark glass. He was 35 years old. His hair was black, except for the grey that had started appearing at his temples. His face was hard. He had forgotten how to make it anything else. The letter sat on his desk behind him. He did not need to read it again. He had memorized every word. Lady Thornwood wrote that she had a stepdaughter, a quiet girl, a biddable girl, a girl who would make no demands and cause no trouble, a girl who needed a home and would be grateful for any shelter provided. Alexander knew what the letter really meant. Lady Thornwood had a burden she wanted to dispose of, a daughter she did not want. She was offering her up like a piece of unwanted furniture. Take her off my hands, and I will ask nothing in return. He should have burned the letter. He should have sent a cold refusal, but something had stopped him. Perhaps it was the way Lady Thornwood described the girl, dutiful, obedient, undemanding. These were not the words used to describe a daughter one loved. These were the words used to describe a servant, a thing, a problem to be solved. Alexander poured himself a glass of brandy and drank it in one swallow. The liquid burned down his throat, but he felt nothing. He had not felt anything in 10 years. Not since he had held his wife's cold hand and known that he had killed her. Not since he had looked at his son's tiny, perfect face and known the child would never draw breath. After that day, something inside him had simply stopped. He went through the motions of living. He managed his estates. He took his seat in Parliament. He signed documents and gave orders and did everything a duke should do. But inside, where his heart used to be, there was only emptiness. His closest friend, Lord Pemberton, had urged him to remarry. You need an heir, Pemberton had said. You cannot spend your life alone in this tomb. Find a young woman. Do your duty. And perhaps that was why Alexander had not burned Lady Thornwood's letter, because duty was the only thing he understood anymore. He could marry this unwanted girl. He could give her a home. He could produce an heir. He could fulfill his obligations, and she could fulfill hers. There would be no love involved, no risk of pain, no chance of loss. Just two people existing side by side in the same empty house. It would be a marriage of convenience. Cold and practical, safe. Alexander set down his glass and turned away from the window. He would go to Thornwood Manor tomorrow. He would meet this girl. If she was truly as biddable and undemanding as the letter claimed, he would make her an offer. She would become the Duchess of Rothwell. She would have wealth and position and security. In return, he would have his heir and his peace. It was a fair exchange. Nothing more, nothing less. He did not let himself think about the girl's feelings. He did not let himself wonder if she wanted this marriage. Wanting had nothing to do with anything. Life was about survival, about doing what needed to be done. He had learned that lesson the hard way. The rain continued through the night. By morning, it had softened to a drizzle. Catherine woke before dawn and dressed in her grey wool dress again. She brushed her hair and pinned it back. She looked at herself in the small, cracked mirror above the wash basin. A plain face looked back. Brown eyes, brown hair, pale skin. Nothing special. Nothing worth loving. She went downstairs to help prepare for the Duke's arrival. Her stepmother did not acknowledge her. Her stepsisters, Beatrice and Charlotte, whispered and giggled behind their hands. They were both pretty and both married to respectable men. They visited Thornwood Manor often just to remind Catherine of what she would never have. "I heard the Duke is quite handsome," Beatrice said. She examined her reflection in the hallway mirror and adjusted a curl. "What a waste on someone like Catherine. Perhaps he is blind," Charlotte said. They both laughed. Catherine kept her head down and continued arranging flowers in the vase on the hall table. Her hands were steady. She had learned to hide her hurt. It lived inside her like a bruise that never healed, but she did not let it show on her face anymore. The Duke arrived at noon. Catherine heard the carriage first. The sound of wheels on gravel, the stamping of horses, the deep voice of a man giving instructions to his driver. She stood in the shadows of the drawing room and watched through the window as he climbed down from the carriage. He was tall, very tall. His shoulders were broad beneath his dark coat. He moved with the confidence of a man who had never been told no. His face was hard to see from this distance, but she could make out strong features, a straight nose, a firm jaw, dark hair that fell across his forehead. Lady Thornwood rushed to greet him. Catherine heard her stepmother's false, sweet voice. "Your Grace, what an honor. Please, do come in. Let me take your coat. Can I offer you tea, or perhaps something stronger?" The Duke's voice was low and rough. "Tea will suffice." They came into the house and Catherine pressed herself back against the wall. She did not want to be seen. Not yet. Not until she had to be. But her stepmother's eyes found her immediately. "Catherine," Lady Thornwood said sharply, "come here. His Grace wishes to meet you." Catherine forced herself to move. She walked across the room with her eyes down. She could feel the Duke looking at her. She could feel the weight of his gaze like a physical thing. She stopped a few feet away and dropped into a curtsy. "Your Grace," she murmured. Silence, long and heavy. Catherine kept her eyes on the floor. She waited for him to say something. Anything. But he just stood there looking at her. She could see his boots. Black leather, polished to a shine. Expensive. A Duke's boots. Finally he spoke. "Look at me." It was not a request. It was a command. Catherine lifted her head slowly. Her eyes traveled up past the boots, past the dark trousers, past the perfectly tailored coat, until she finally met his gaze. And then she forgot how to breathe. His eyes were blue, not the soft blue of summer sky, the cold blue of winter ice. They looked at her without warmth, without interest, without anything at all, but they were also sad. So impossibly sad. It was like looking into a well with no bottom. Catherine saw pain there, old pain, the kind that turned people into stone. "How old are you?" he asked. 23, Your Grace." "Have you been presented at court?" "No, Your Grace." "Do you have any suitors?" Her stepmother laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Catherine has never had a suitor, Your Grace. She is not the sort to attract attention." Catherine felt her cheeks burn. She dropped her gaze again. The Duke was silent for another long moment. Then he turned to Lady Thornwood. "I would like to speak with Lady Catherine alone." Lady Thornwood's eyebrows shot up. "Your Grace, I am not sure that would be proper. I am not asking for your permission." His voice was cold and flat. "Leave us." Catherine heard her stepmother's sharp intake of breath, but no one argued with a duke. Lady Thornwood swept from the room, her skirts snapping with anger. The door closed behind her, and Catherine was alone with this cold, sad man. "Sit down," he said. Catherine sat in the chair nearest her. She folded her hands in her lap and waited. The Duke walked to the window and looked out at the rain-soaked garden. His hands were clasped behind his back. He stood so still he might have been carved from marble. "I am going to be blunt with you, Lady Catherine," he said without turning around. "I need a wife, not for love, not for companionship. I need an heir. I need someone to manage my household and appear at my side when required. In return, I will give you wealth, security, and freedom from this place. You will want for nothing material. You will be treated with respect, but I will not pretend to offer you affection. Do you understand?" Catherine's heart hammered in her chest. She had expected something like this, but hearing it said so plainly still shocked her. He wanted a wife the way other men wanted a housekeeper, someone to fulfill a function, someone useful and invisible. "I understand, Your Grace," she whispered. "I will not demand your presence constantly. You may occupy your own rooms. You may pursue your own interests. I will require your company at dinner and at public functions, and I will require," he paused, "I will require that you fulfill your duties as my wife, in order to produce an heir." Catherine felt her face go hot. She knew what he meant. She was not completely naive, but the thought of sharing a bed with this cold, hard man made her feel something close to panic. And yet, what choice did she have? Stay here and rot in this house where she was hated, or become a duchess and at least have a purpose? "I understand," she said again. He finally turned to look at her. Those ice-blue eyes studied her face. "You do not have to accept. I will not force you. What would happen to me if I refused?" "I do not know. That is between you and your stepmother." Catherine laughed. It came out bitter and broken. "Then I have no choice at all, do I?" Something flickered across his face. It was gone so quickly she might have imagined it, but for just a moment he looked almost human, almost sympathetic. "No," he said quietly, "I suppose you do not." He crossed the room and stood before her chair. He held out his hand. "Then we have an understanding. I will arrange for a special license. We will marry within the week. You will have time to gather your things." Catherine looked at his hand. It was large and broad, with long fingers, a gentleman's hand, but there were calluses on his palm. She could see them, even from where she sat. This Duke was not just a man of leisure. He worked. He rode. He did things with his hands. For some reason that made her feel slightly less afraid. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and firm. He helped her to her feet. They stood close together, close enough that she could smell him. Soap and leather and something else. Something clean and masculine. "What is your Christian name?" he asked. "Catherine." "Catherine?" He said it slowly, as if testing how it felt in his mouth. "You may call me Alexander when we are alone." "Alexander," she repeated. It felt strange to say a duke's name so informally, but he had given her permission. He released her hand and stepped back. The cold mask fell over his face again. "I will send word about the wedding arrangements. Pack lightly. You will have new clothes made when we reach Rothwell House. Yes, Your Grace. He walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. Catherine. She looked up. I know this is not what you dreamed of, he said. His voice was softer now, almost gentle. But I promise you will be safe. No one will hurt you in my house. You have my word. Then he was gone. The door closed behind him, and Catherine was alone. She sank back into the chair and stared at her hands. They were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. In 5 minutes, her entire life had changed. She was going to marry a duke, a cold, sad duke who wanted a wife the way someone might want a piece of furniture, useful and undemanding. But he had promised she would be safe, and safety was more than she had now, so she would take it. She would marry him. She would become the Duchess of Rothwell, and maybe in his big house with all its empty rooms, she could finally stop hurting quite so much. The wedding happened 4 days later in the small chapel at Rothwell House. There were no guests, no flowers, no celebration, just a vicar, 2 servants as witnesses, and the cold formality of vows spoken without feeling. Catherine wore a simple dress of pale blue silk that the Duke had sent over. It fit her perfectly. Someone had taken her measurements while she slept. The thought should have bothered her, but she was too numb to care. She stood beside Alexander in the chapel and repeated the words the vicar told her to say. She promised to love, honor, and obey. The words felt like stones in her mouth. Alexander's voice was steady and clear. He promised to take her as his wife, to protect and provide for her. He did not promise to love her. That word was carefully avoided. When it came time for the kiss, he leaned down and brushed his lips against her cheek. It was quick and impersonal, like a seal on a contract. And that was all this was. Catherine reminded herself. A contract. An arrangement. Nothing more. After the ceremony, Alexander showed her to her rooms. They were in the east wing of Rothwell House, connected to his own chambers by a single door. The rooms were beautiful, large and airy with tall windows that overlooked the gardens. The furniture was fine and elegant. The bed was huge, covered in soft linens and thick blankets. There was a sitting area with comfortable chairs and a writing desk by the window. "This is yours," Alexander said. He stood in the doorway, not quite entering. "You may decorate it however you wish. The housekeeper, Mrs. Evans, will help you with anything you need. If you require anything, pull that cord. Someone will come." "Thank you, Your Grace." "Alexander," he corrected. "In private, you call me Alexander." "Alexander," she whispered. He nodded. "We dine at 8. Someone will come to fetch you." He turned to leave, then paused. "Catherine, welcome to Rothwell House." Then he was gone. Catherine stood in the middle of her beautiful new rooms and felt completely lost. She was a duchess now. She lived in a grand house. She had everything she could possibly need, except someone to talk to, except someone to care. She walked to the window and looked out at the gardens. They were vast and green and beautifully maintained. She could see roses blooming in neat rows. She could see a fountain in the center of a circular path. She could see stone benches beneath old oak trees. It was lovely, but it was also lonely. That night, Catherine dressed for dinner with the help of a lady's maid named Anne. The girl was young and efficient and silent. She helped Catherine into a gown of deep green silk and arranged her hair in a simple style. Catherine looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. She looked like a duchess. She looked like someone who mattered, but inside she felt the same. Small and unwanted and afraid. Alexander was already in the dining room when she arrived. He stood when she entered and waited until she was seated before sitting down himself. The table was long and formal. He sat at one end and she sat at the other. The distance between them felt like miles. Servants brought course after course, soup and fish, and roasted meat and vegetables and pudding. Catherine ate small portions and tried not to think about how quiet it was. The only sounds were the clink of silverware on china and the soft footsteps of servants. Finally, Alexander spoke. "How are your rooms?" "They are beautiful." "Thank you." "Good." He took a sip of wine. "Tomorrow, Mrs. Evans will take you through the house. You should familiarize yourself with the layout, and the day after, a modiste will come from London to fit you for new clothes." "That is very generous." "It is necessary. You are a duchess now. You must look the part." Catherine set down her fork. "Am I to have any other duties beyond looking the part?" He glanced at her. Something flickered in his eyes. "You may do as you please with your time. Manage the household if you wish. Mrs. Evans has been doing it for years and does not need supervision. But if you want to take over, she will defer to you. Read, paint, walk in the gardens. I do not care how you spend your days. And by evenings, we will dine together. It is expected." He paused. "And once you have settled in, I will come to your room to fulfill the terms of our arrangement." Catherine's stomach twisted. "How soon?" "When you are ready, I will not force myself on you." His voice was flat, emotionless. "But I would prefer not to wait long. I need an heir." "I understand." They finished the meal in silence. When Catherine rose to leave, Alexander stood as well. He walked her to the foot of the stairs and bowed slightly. "Good night, Catherine." "Good night, Alexander." She climbed the stairs alone and returned to her empty, beautiful rooms. Anne helped her undress and put on a nightgown of soft white cotton. Then the maid left, and Catherine was alone. She climbed into the huge bed and pulled the covers up to her chin. The room was dark except for the fire burning in the hearth. Shadows danced across the ceiling. Catherine closed her eyes and tried to sleep. But all she could think about was Alexander's cold voice saying he needed an heir. She was here to perform a function, to produce a child, to be useful, just like always, just like everywhere she had ever been. She turned onto her side and felt tears slip down her cheeks. She cried silently, the way she had learned to do years ago. No sound, no sobbing, just tears that fell and soaked into the pillow. She cried for the life she would never have, the love she would never know, the happiness that was always just out of reach. In his own room, Alexander sat by the fire and stared into the flames. He had a wife now, a quiet, sad girl who looked at him with frightened eyes. He told himself it did not matter. He told himself this was just an arrangement. But when he had seen her standing in the drawing room at Thornwood Manor, something inside him had cracked, just a little, just enough to let in a tiny sliver of light. She had looked so small, so defeated. Her stepmother's casual cruelty had made him angry in a way he had not felt in years. And when Catherine had said she had no choice, he had wanted to tell her to run, to refuse him, to choose freedom over security. But he had not said it, because he needed her. He needed this marriage. He needed an heir, and maybe she needed safety more than she needed freedom. He stood and walked to the connecting door between their rooms. He pressed his palm against the wood. On the other side, his wife was sleeping, or trying to. He wondered if she was afraid. He wondered if she hated him. He wondered if she cried. He pulled his hand back and turned away. It did not matter. None of it mattered. This was how things had to be. He would keep his distance. He would give her space, and when enough time had passed, he would do what needed to be done, quickly, efficiently, without emotion. It was better this way. For both of them, the days passed slowly. Catherine explored Rothwell House with Mrs. Evans. The housekeeper was an older woman with a kind face and gentle manner. She showed Catherine every room, from the grand ballroom that had not been used in a decade to the library that held thousands of books. His Grace spends most of his time in the library, Mrs. Evans said. He reads a great deal, and he manages the estate from there. Catherine nodded. She had not seen Alexander since their wedding night dinner. He kept to his side of the house, and she kept to hers. They were married, but they lived like strangers, like two people who happened to occupy the same building. The modiste came and measured Catherine for new gowns. The woman brought fabric samples in every color. Catherine chose simple styles and muted colors. She did not want to stand out. She did not want attention. The modiste looked disappointed, but took the orders without comment. At night, Catherine and Alexander still dined together. The meals were quiet. Sometimes he asked her polite questions. Did she enjoy her walk today? Had she found the library satisfactory? Was she comfortable? She gave polite answers. Yes, yes. And then they finished eating and went their separate ways. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Catherine began to relax slightly. Maybe Alexander had changed his mind. Maybe he had decided he did not need an heir after all. Maybe she could just live here quietly and never have to face that final duty. But then one evening at dinner, he set down his wineglass and looked at her directly. I will come to your room tonight. Catherine's hand froze halfway to her mouth. She set down her fork carefully. Tonight? Yes. You have had time to settle. We have an agreement. His voice was cold. All business. It is time to fulfill it. Catherine felt her chest tighten. She could not breathe, could not think. She nodded once and then stood. I will be ready. She left the dining room before he could say anything else. She walked quickly to her chambers, her heart pounding. Anne helped her prepare for bed. The maid's hands were gentle as she brushed out Catherine's hair and helped her into a clean nightgown. But Anne's eyes were sad. She knew what was coming. Everyone knew. After Anne left, Catherine sat on the edge of the bed and waited. The clock on the mantel ticked. Each second felt like an hour. She heard his footsteps in the hallway, heard them stop outside her door, heard the knock. Come in, she called. Her voice shook. The door opened, and Alexander stepped inside. He wore a dark dressing gown over his shirt and trousers. His hair was slightly disheveled. He looked at her for a long moment, and then closed the door behind him. I will try to be quick, he said quietly, and gentle. Catherine nodded. She could not speak. He crossed the room and sat beside her on the bed. He smelled like soap and brandy. His hands were shaking. She realized suddenly that he was nervous too. This cold, powerful duke was nervous. He reached out and touched her cheek. His fingers were warm. You are afraid. Yes. So am I. The admission seemed to cost him something. His jaw tightened. I have not done this since my wife died. I do not know if I remember how to be gentle. Catherine looked at him, really looked at him. His face was hard, but his eyes were lost. He looked like a man drowning, like a man who had forgotten how to feel anything at all. And suddenly she understood. He was not cold. He was broken, just like her. We can try together, she whispered. Something shifted in his expression. The ice cracked just a little. He leaned forward and pressed his forehead against hers. They stayed like that for a long moment. breathing the same air, sharing the same fear. Then he kissed her. It was soft and careful. His lips moved against hers like a question. She kissed him back. It was clumsy and uncertain, but it was also real. For just that moment, they were not a duke and his unwanted duchess. They were just two lonely people trying to connect. He laid her back against the pillows, and the night progressed with whispered words and gentle touches. It was not passionate. It was not romantic. But it was tender. He kept his promise. He was careful with her, and when it was over, he did not immediately leave. He lay beside her in the darkness and held her hand. "Thank you," he said finally. "For what?" "For being kind. I did not expect kindness." Catherine turned her head to look at him. "I did not expect gentleness. I think we are both surprised." He almost smiled. It was just a tiny twitch at the corner of his mouth, but it was there. "Perhaps we are." He left shortly after, and Catherine was alone again. But something had changed. She felt it like a shift in the air. They had shared something. Not love, not yet, but something human. Something that made them less like strangers. She touched her lips where he had kissed her and felt the smallest flicker of hope. Maybe this marriage did not have to be completely empty. Maybe they could find something together, something small and fragile but real. The next morning, Catherine woke to find a note slipped under her door. It was written in a bold masculine hand. "I hope you are well this morning. If you would like, we could take a walk in the garden after luncheon. Alexander." Catherine read the note 3 times. He wanted to spend time with her, not because he had to, because he wanted to. She pressed the note to her chest and felt that flicker of hope grow slightly brighter. She wrote back a simple yes and gave it to a footman to deliver. Then she spent the rest of the morning trying not to think too much about what it might mean. But her heart kept racing. Her stomach kept fluttering. She felt nervous and excited and afraid all at once. After luncheon, she met Alexander in the main hall. He wore riding boots and a simple coat. His hair fell across his forehead. He looked younger somehow, less severe. "Shall we?" He offered his arm. Catherine took it. They walked out into the garden together. The sun was shining for the first time in weeks. The roses were in full bloom. The air smelled sweet and clean. They walked slowly along the gravel paths, not speaking at first, just walking side by side. Finally, Alexander spoke. "I realize I know very little about you. There is not much to know." "I doubt that." He glanced at her. "Tell me something. Anything. What do you like to do?" Catherine thought for a moment. "I like to read, and I used to like gardening. My father and I would work in the garden together when I was young." "What did you grow?" "Flowers, mostly. Roses and lavender. He taught me their names." She smiled at the memory. He said every living thing needed love and attention to bloom. "He sounds like a good man." He was. Catherine's smile faded. "When he died, everything changed. My stepmother did not want me. I was just a burden to her." Alexander was quiet for a moment. "I understand what it is like to lose someone, to have your entire world shift in a moment." "Your wife," Catherine said softly. "Yes." His voice went rough. "Anna. She was 19 when we married. So young, so full of life. I thought we would have decades together, but we had less than a year. I am sorry." "So am I." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "I blamed myself for a long time. I still do. If I had not insisted on an heir so quickly, if I had given her more time, maybe she would have lived." Catherine saw the pain in his eyes and felt an answering ache in her chest. You cannot know that. Sometimes terrible things happen, and there is no reason, no one to blame. Perhaps. He reached out and touched her face, the same gentle gesture from last night. You are wiser than I gave you credit for. They continued walking. The conversation flowed more easily now. He asked about her childhood, and she asked about his. He told her about growing up as a duke's son, about the weight of expectations, about always having to be perfect. She told him about her father's love of music, about how he used to sing while they worked in the garden. "Do you sing?" Alexander asked. "I used to. My father called me his little songbird." Catherine felt her throat tighten. "But I have not sung in years." "Maybe you will again." He said it simply, like a fact. They walked until the sun began to set. Then they returned to the house together. At the foot of the stairs, Alexander took her hand and raised it to his lips. He kissed her knuckles softly. "Thank you for this afternoon. I enjoyed it." "So did I," Catherine whispered. That night at dinner, the silence felt different. It was not uncomfortable anymore. It was companionable. They ate and occasionally caught each other's eyes across the table. Small smiles passed between them. Tiny acknowledgements that something was shifting. After dinner, Alexander walked her to her door again. "Good night, Catherine." "Good night, Alexander." He hesitated, then leaned down and kissed her forehead. It was sweet and chaste. "Sleep well." Catherine went to bed that night, feeling lighter than she had in years. She did not cry. She just lay in the darkness and thought about the way Alexander had looked at her in the garden, like she mattered, like she was worth knowing. The days that followed fell into a gentle rhythm. They walked together every afternoon. They talked about everything and nothing. She learned that he loved history and poetry. He learned that she could identify dozens of plant species just by looking at them. They shared meals and began to laugh occasionally. Small chuckles at first, then real laughter that echoed through the dining room. Mrs. Evans noticed the change. "His Grace seems happier," she told Catherine one morning. "I have not seen him smile in 10 years, but yesterday I heard him laugh. That was your doing." Catherine blushed. "I do not think I have done anything special. You have given him a reason to feel again." "That is very special indeed." Alexander visited Catherine's room twice more in those weeks. Each time was easier than the last. He was always gentle, always careful, but there was something more now, a warmth that had not been there before. He held her afterward and they talked quietly in the darkness. She told him about her dreams. He told her about his fears. They were becoming friends, or maybe something more than friends. One evening, they were walking in the garden when it began to rain. Not a gentle drizzle, but a sudden downpour. They ran for the house, but they were both soaked through by the time they reached the terrace. Catherine was laughing. She could not help it. The rain felt like freedom. Alexander stared at her. Water dripped from his hair. His shirt clung to his chest, and he was smiling, really smiling. "You are laughing." "I cannot help it." She spun in a circle, her face turned up to the sky. "I love the rain." "I remember." His voice went soft. "You were standing in the rain when I first saw you, at Thornwood Manor. You looked so lost." Catherine stopped spinning. She looked at him and saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. It was not cold anymore. It was warm, burning warm. "I was lost," she whispered, "but I think I am found now." Alexander closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He pulled her against his chest and kissed her. Not carefully this time, not gently. He kissed her like a man who had been starving and finally found food. His hands tangled in her wet hair. his body pressed against hers. Catherine kissed him back with everything she had. All the loneliness, all the hope, all the feeling that had been building inside her for weeks. She wrapped her arms around his neck and held on tight. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Alexander rested his forehead against hers, just like that first night. But this was different. This was not fear or duty. This was something else entirely. "Catherine," he whispered, "I think I am falling in love with you." Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes. Happy tears. "I think I am falling in love with you too." He kissed her again. Softer this time. Sweeter. Then he scooped her up in his arms and carried her inside. They were both soaking wet and dripping water all over the marble floors, but neither of them cared. He carried her up the stairs to her room and laid her gently on the bed.
"I want to do this right," he said. His voice was rough with emotion. "Not because we have to, because we want to."
"Yes," Catherine breathed. "Yes." That night was different from all the others. It was not duty or obligation. It was desire and tenderness and the beginning of real love. He touched her like she was precious. He whispered her name like a prayer. And afterward he held her close and did not let go. "Stay," she whispered. "Please stay with me tonight." "Always," he promised. They fell asleep tangled together, her head on his chest and his arms wrapped around her. For the first time in 10 years, Alexander did not have nightmares. For the first time in 9 years, Catherine did not cry herself to sleep. They simply rested in each other's warmth and felt whole. The next weeks were like a dream. They were inseparable. They rode together in the mornings. They read together in the library in the afternoons. They danced together in the empty ballroom at night, humming their own music. They talked and laughed and slowly let down all their walls. Catherine bloomed. She wore brighter colors. She smiled more. She even began to sing again while she worked in the garden. Her voice was soft and sweet, and Alexander would stop whatever he was doing just to listen. "There is my songbird," he would say, and she would blush and feel beautiful for the first time in her life. Alexander transformed too. The hardness left his face. He smiled often. He laughed daily. The servants whispered about the change. His grace was happy. His grace was in love. It was a miracle. One morning, Catherine woke, feeling ill. She barely made it to the wash basin before she was sick. Anne heard her and came running. The maid's eyes went wide. "My lady, how long have you been feeling poorly?" "Just this morning." Anne smiled. "I think perhaps we should send for the doctor, just to be sure." The doctor came that afternoon. He examined Catherine privately and then gave her the news with a gentle smile. She was with child, about 2 months along, he estimated, healthy and progressing well. Catherine sat in her room after the doctor left and tried to process the information. She was going to have a baby. Alexander's baby. An heir for Rothwell. But more than that, a child born of love. A child who would be wanted and cherished. She went to find Alexander immediately. He was in the library, reading by the window. He looked up when she entered, and his face lit up with joy. "Catherine, I was just thinking about you." "Alexander, I have something to tell you." She crossed the room and took his hands. "The doctor came today." His expression shifted to concern. "Are you unwell?" No. I am perfectly well. She took a deep breath. "I am with child." Alexander went very still. His eyes searched her face. "A child?" "Yes, in about 7 months." He pulled her into his arms, so quickly she gasped. He held her tight. his face buried in her hair. His whole body was shaking. "A child," he repeated. His voice broke. "Our child."
"Are you happy?" she asked.
She needed to hear it. He pulled back and cupped her face in his hands. Tears were running down his cheeks. "Happy? Catherine, I am terrified and overjoyed and grateful beyond words. I love you so much it frightens me." "I love you too," she whispered. He kissed her then, long and deep and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, he kept his hands on her face and looked at her like she held the sun and moon and stars. "I will not let anything happen to you," he said fiercely. "I will keep you safe, both of you. I swear it." "I know," she said. "I trust you." They spent the rest of the day making plans. Alexander insisted she rest more, eat more, take no chances with her health. Catherine laughed at his hovering but secretly loved it. She had never been fussed over before. It felt wonderful. That night they lay in bed together, and he placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I am your papa. And I promise to love you and your mama with everything I have." Catherine felt tears slip down her temples. Happy tears. Healing tears. "We are going to be a family." "Yes," Alexander said. He kissed her forehead. "A real family, built on love." The months passed peacefully. Catherine's belly grew round. Alexander was never far from her side. He read to her. He brought her tea and sweets. He helped her walk in the gardens even when she waddled like a duck. He loved her through every moment. But then, 3 weeks before the baby was due, a carriage arrived at Rothwell House. Lady Thornwood stepped out, followed by Beatrice and Charlotte. Catherine saw them from the window and felt ice slide through her veins. "What are they doing here?" she whispered. Alexander was beside her in an instant. "I do not know, but I will handle it." They went down to the main hall together. Lady Thornwood swept in like she owned the place. Her eyes raked over Catherine's swollen belly with distaste. "So it is true, you are with child," she sniffed. "How fortunate for you. What do you want?" Alexander's voice was cold as winter. "I heard my dear stepdaughter was about to make me a grandmother of sorts. I thought I should visit, make sure she is being properly cared for." Lady Thornwood's smile was cruel. "After all, I raised her. I know how difficult she can be." "You did not raise her," Alexander said quietly. "You tormented her. You made her believe she was worthless. You treated her like a burden." Lady Thornwood's eyes narrowed. "I gave her shelter and food, more than she deserved. You gave her nothing but pain." Alexander stepped forward. His presence was commanding, powerful. "And you will leave my house now. You are not welcome here. You will never be welcome here. How dare you speak to me that way? I am her family. You are nothing to her." Alexander's voice rose. "You are a cruel, heartless woman who took joy in hurting a grieving child. Catherine deserves better than you. She deserves love and respect and kindness. All the things you never gave her." Beatrice spoke up. "You cannot throw us out. We have a right." "You have no rights in my house." Alexander turned to the butler. "Show these women out. If they return, they are to be denied entry." Lady Thornwood's face turned red with rage. "You will regret this. I will tell everyone how ungrateful she is, how she has become too proud. I will ruin her reputation." "Try." Alexander moved to stand beside Catherine, his arm around her shoulders. "No one will believe you. She is the Duchess of Rothwell. She is beloved by my staff and respected in society. You are nothing but a bitter woman who mistreated her stepdaughter." If you spread lies, I will make sure everyone knows the truth about you." For the first time, Lady Thornwood looked uncertain. She glanced at Catherine, who stood tall despite her swollen belly and tear-filled eyes. "I am not your burden anymore," Catherine said softly. "I am loved now. I matter, and you cannot hurt me ever again." Lady Thornwood turned on her heel and swept out, her daughters following. The door closed behind them, and silence fell. Catherine felt her knees give way. Alexander caught her and held her up. "I have you," he murmured. "You are safe." Catherine buried her face in his chest and cried, not from sadness, from relief, from joy, from the overwhelming knowledge that she was truly free now, free from the past, free from the pain, free to be loved. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for defending me." "Always," he promised. "I will always defend you. You are my wife, my love, the mother of my child. You are everything to me." They stood there in the hall, holding each other, until Catherine's tears stopped. Then Alexander led her to their favorite sitting room and settled her on the sofa. He sat beside her and kept her hand clasped in his. "I was so afraid," she admitted. "When I saw her, I felt 14 again, small and worthless." "You have never been worthless. Never." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it. "You are the strongest, kindest, most beautiful person I have ever known. You saved me, Catherine. You brought me back to life." "We saved each other," she said. He smiled. "Yes, I think we did." 3 weeks later, Catherine went into labor. It was long and difficult, and Alexander refused to leave her side. He held her hand and wiped her forehead and whispered encouragement. When she screamed, he did not flinch. When she cursed him, he apologized. When she wept, he wept with her. And finally, after hours of struggle, a baby's cry filled the room. The midwife held up a tiny red-faced infant. "A boy, Your Grace. A healthy baby boy." Alexander looked at his son and felt something break open inside him. He started to cry. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. He is alive and perfect." The midwife cleaned the baby and placed him in Catherine's arms. She looked down at her son and felt love so powerful it took her breath away. He had dark hair like his father, tiny fingers that gripped hers tightly, a small mouth that opened in another demanding cry. "Hello, my love," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." Alexander sat on the edge of the bed and wrapped his arms around them both. His wife and his son, his family. What should we name him? Catherine thought for a moment. "Henry, after my father." "Henry," Alexander repeated. He kissed the baby's forehead. "Henry William Crane, Duke of Rothwell one day. But for now, just our precious boy." They sat together as the sun rose. A new day, a new life, a new beginning for all of them. The months that followed were filled with joy. Henry grew strong and healthy. Catherine recovered well. Alexander was a devoted father and husband. He would spend hours just holding his son and marveling at him. He would tell Henry stories. He would sing to him. He would promise him love and protection and a life free from pain. Catherine bloomed even more as a mother. She was patient and gentle and fierce in her protection. She sang to Henry every night, the same songs her father had sung to her. Her voice filled Rothwell House with warmth and music. One afternoon, almost a year after Henry's birth, they walked in the garden together as a family. Henry toddled between them, holding both their hands. He laughed at everything. The flowers, the birds, the way the sun felt on his face. "He is happy," Catherine said. "He will grow up knowing he is loved." "Yes." Alexander stopped and pulled her close with his free arm. And so will you. Every day for the rest of our lives, I will make sure you know how precious you are. I already know, she said. She smiled up at him. You show me every day. He kissed her, soft and sweet. Henry giggled and pulled at their legs. They broke apart laughing. Come here, you little troublemaker. Alexander scooped up his son and tossed him gently in the air. Henry shrieked with delight. Catherine watched them and felt her heart overflow. This was what she had dreamed of all those lonely years. Love, family, belonging. She had fallen against his chest in the rain, broken and afraid. She had felt his pain and recognized it as her own, and together they had healed. She had understood that day why the Duke never took a wife after his first wife died. He had been too broken, too afraid, too empty. But she had filled those empty spaces with her kindness and strength. She had shown him that love did not have to end in tragedy. It could end in joy. And he had shown her that she was worthy, that she was beautiful, that she mattered. He had taken a girl who believed she was nothing and made her believe she was everything. They were not perfect. They still had moments of doubt and fear, but they faced them together. They chose love every single day. They chose each other. As the sun set over Rothwell House, Alexander held his wife and son close. I love you, he said, both of you, more than words can say. And we love you, Catherine replied. They walked back to the house together. A duke who had learned to feel again, a duchess who had learned her worth, and a little boy who would grow up surrounded by love. It was not the beginning they had planned, but it was the ending they deserved. And sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that start in pain and end in healing. The ones where two broken people become whole by simply choosing to love. This was their story, and it was perfect.